Okay, thank you for waiting. So my talk's going to be a kind of follow-up to Glenn's talk from yesterday, and it's going to be where he showed that you gain fitness benefits when you lose certain biosynthetic functions, and maybe by you I mean bacteria, and this is the cover slide. So yeah, my project is more about that I'm interested in where does this fitness benefit come from. So when you lose a biosynthetic function, what's the mechanism of the fitness gain of this? So I'm looking very much on these costs which these biosynthetic functions imply to the organism, and especially how the environment changes these costs. So it's going to be a lot of intracellular amino acid metabolism, but I hope in the end I can convince you that it anyway has a vast impact on how bacteria adapt to the environment and how cells and communities may interact with each other. Okay, so let me start with this. So this whole square represents the proteome of E. coli in the exponential growth phase. So on each polygon, I hope you can see that, these polygons represent in its size the mass fraction of a specific protein in the proteome. So what you can see is that most of these proteins in the proteome are actually involved in genetic information processing, like translation or transcription, or in metabolism. So and if you zoom in a little bit more, it gets apparent that a very last fraction, actually in fact that's 22% of the whole proteome is devoted to amino acid biosynthesis and amino acid metabolism. So already from this it's very apparent that amino acids imply a vast cost to the cell, and but on one side, so this is only one side of these costs, these protein costs. On the other hand, there's these metabolic costs. So how much resource, how much ATP do you need to produce a specific amino acid? So, and these costs, for example, has been estimated in this study here early on, and they estimated how many ATP molecules are needed to produce a certain amino acid, and they found that this is negatively correlated with these with the major codon usage. So that these costs of these amino acids. So, for example, here are expensive amino acids like tryptophan because it's big, it needs a lot of ATP. They found that it's less used in the proteome than the cheap amino acids. So, but what has not been considered in this study is how environmental factors could change these biosynthetic costs. And in fact, bacteria use very different resources from the environment. For example, for E. coli, it's known that they can take up more than 100 different chemically different compounds as their sole source of carbon and energy. So a question that I was asking here, how does these biosynthetic costs can change when bacteria switch to different resources? So to answer these questions, we developed this kind of computational approach, which consisted mainly of the metabolic network structure of E. coli. So we used the genome scale metabolic network, and there you could decide what your carbon source is and what your objective of production is. For example, these amino acids in my case. So and then from this setup, you could perform flux balance analysis, and what this in principle does, it calculates you the optimal pathway from the carbon source towards the amino acid through that network. And then with optimal, I mean that it minimizes the amount of carbon source that is needed to produce that amino acid. So in the end, you could answer this question: how many mole of a resource do you need to produce 1 mole of an amino acid? Okay, so this is some results of this. So I calculated this, for example, for sugars or sugar alcohols like fructose, maltose, xylose, and glycerol. And these have in common that they all enter the central metabolism of E. coli in the glycolysis or in the pentose phosphate pathway. And I did it also for 4 organic acids: pyruvate, lactate, succinate, and malate. And all of these, they enter the central metabolism in the TCA cycle or in the pyruvate metabolism. So at very different places in that network. And what I could show is that because they enter the metabolism in different stages, they imply very different costs to these amino acids. So when you look at these amino acids, these groups here, like all of these amino acids have their precursor also in the glycolysis. They are relatively cheaply produced when sugars are the carbon source, whereas they are expensive if it's an organic acid. It's the complete other way around for these amino acids which have their precursors in TCA cycle. And so from this, it suggests that there's a trade-off in these metabolic costs of amino acids depending on the carbon source. But so these are just computational predictions and simply based on the structure of the metabolic network. So I wanted to see if actually these cost differences have an influence on the bacterial physiology. So I came up with an experiment which consisted mainly of 2 strains: an amino acid oxidotrophic strain that Glenn introduced yesterday already, and an E. coli wild type strain. So the only difference between these 2 strains is that this oxidotrophic strain has a gene deletion mutation on the biosynthetic pathway. So it's not able to produce that amino acid anymore. So it's required to take it up from the environment. So I started cultures with this, like monocultures, and applying different carbon sources. And to these cultures, I provided different concentrations, increasing concentrations of that amino acid that the auxotroph cannot produce. So from these cultures, I simply measured the kinetic growth curves. And so the final graph that I wanted to get out of this experiment is like this response curve, where you have on the x-axis the amino acid concentration, increasing amino acid concentration, on the y-axis the growth rates. So a general outcome that was found there also in clan experiments that the Y-type is not very responding to amino acid supplementation in terms of maximum growth rate. Whereas the auxotrophic strain, of course, increases its growth rate because it's limited by that amino acid. And what I want to highlight here is that this increase of the growth rate is a very good proxy of these metabolic costs, because the resources that the auxotroph saves by not synthesizing that amino acid by themselves, they could invest in other cell growth-related functions as to produce other like proteins and things like this. So I did this, for example, for a tryptophan auxotrophic strain, and what you can see here is the increasing amino acid concentration for all these 8 different carbon sources that I've showed you earlier already, and on the y-axis the relative maximum growth rate. Relative because it's normalized for the Y-type, because the Y-type has also already really different growth rates on different carbon sources. So what you can see here is that, of course, the amino acid the maximum growth rate is increasing with increasing amino acid concentrations, which sounds at this point maybe a bit obvious, but in another way of thinking, this means that by increasing the amino acid concentrations, you have a tool to adjust very much the growth rate of your auxotrophic strain. And by making small adjustments of this amino acid supplementation, you could measure the carbon source specific response for each of these carbon sources. Yeah. So I did this also for other auxotrophic strains like leucine or lysine and also others. So for example, leucine has the precursor in the pyruvate metabolism and lysine in the TCA cycle. So they are very different stages. So now I could measure all these slopes, these increases of these curves, and then compare them with the predictions. So what you have here on the x-axis is the predicted, yes, it's the predicted metabolic cost from our approach, and on the y-axis the increase of the maximum growth rate under these carbon sources. What you can see is that there's a positive correlation with this. So if an amino acid is very costly, then the auxotroph saves, of course, more cost for this because it's not producing it anymore. So and can catch up the Y-type growth level much faster than if that amino acid would be less expensive. Okay, so to sum up this first part is that amino acids are the cost of amino acids can differ very much between different carbon sources, and that the auxotrophs respond differently to amino acid supplementation. And that the increase of the growth rate can be very much also explained by the structure of the metabolic network. So okay, at this point you could ask, like, okay, what's the relevance of all these results? And what I want to show you on the next slides is that even these cost difference, which might be just very little, could have a vast impact on how bacteria adapt to their environment. So for that I want to go back to this experiment that Glenn showed yesterday, and he showed that these different auxotrophic strains are able to outcompete the Y-type in environments where that amino acid or nucleotide or vitamin is present. So, and from this we ask also, how often do we see these auxotrophies in nature? Also that's what he showed. He showed it also yesterday. And what you can see is that auxotrophs are very prevalent in nature. Like, and endosombrions, of course, have many auxotrophies because they usually live in nutrition-rich environments. But what I want to highlight here is that even like if you look at all bacteria, a majority of them have 2 or more auxotrophies in their genome. So they require 2 or more metabolites in their environment. And you could ask now which auxotrophies co-occur very frequently together and which do not. And so you could plot it like this. So big bubbles mean they occur very frequently. Small bubbles mean they occur less frequent. And I wanted to see if some of these costs, which I showed you earlier, these metabolic costs, have a signature on this pattern that we see here. So I would like to go back to this cost slide. So you could see that the cost for this group of amino acids, they are very similar. So if you change the amino acid, the carbon source, the cost between tryptophan and tyrosine behave more or less similar. The same is true for 2 amino acids from this part, but the cost between this part and this part are very reciprocal. So this is the trade-off that I meant earlier. And if we now presume that bacteria prefer to lose biosynthetic costly functions to get more benefit from this, we would assume that you see auxotrophies occurring more within these groups, but not so often between these 2 groups. So I did that on this co-occurrence data, and I clustered this simply, and I found that there's one cluster which is very much enriched in these amino acids from the first class, and the second cluster which is enriched in amino acid from the second class. So it's evidence for that these cores very much differ how they adapt to their environment. Okay, to conclude all this, I just want to say the implications of these cost differences. So, for example, if you consider a microbial community, they often consider more than 2 cells. So what Glenn has shown that auxotrophies are actually beneficial. So if you gain an auxotrophy, you outcompete wild type in environments where the amino acid is there. So, and if you now assume that there are also different resources in the environment, you could have specialized subpopulations in there. And because these subpopulations take up different carbon sources, and these carbon sources might be chemically different, they change the cost inside the cell for different amino acids. And if they now cross-feed these, so the source of these amino acids could be cross-feeding, and this could be beneficial for both of them because the costs between these cells might differ. So if they exchange more efficiently produced amino acids, both of these subpopulations would receive a mutual benefit. Okay. So, and this part I would like to thank my 2 groups where I'm working at. So this group of Christian Kost, which is working more experimental, and the group of Professor Christoph Kaleta is working more on the theoretical side of the project, and Professor Gabriele Dickert, she gave a lot of input about bacterial physiology. Okay, and the funding bodies, of course. Thank you.
When you're supplementing your auxotrophic mutants with amino acids, are you really looking at transport? Are you looking at the increase of growth rate with concentration of amino acid? Isn't that about transport primarily?
You mean transfer from the environment into the cell?
Amino acid has to get into the cell.
Yes.
And that has a certain rate. It depends on the concentration. And I guess that would drive the whole thing.
Yeah. But since I'm applying to all of these different cultures with different carbon sources the same concentrations, I assume that this transport rate is similar in all these cases, independent of that carbon source, because I compare then the slope of the between carbon sources.
Yeah, but we have different repression. I mean, glucose, for example, represses lots of uptake systems for other stuff. I mean, this is
it could be true, but in
manipulation will make this more complicated.
Sure. But in the end, like, these cells are very obligated to take these up, so I believe that they need to, because since they need to take this up in order to grow, I assume that they optimize their transport rate into that cell for that amino acid. So.
Okay, but that means have you evolved your strains after knocking out the synthesis gene?
No.
So you can't assume that they have optimized.
Yeah, that's true, but yes. I mean, what we see, they've done some microarray analysis, and then we see that they very much upregulate, they upregulate the uptake also of these amino acids, because of course they are necessary to do that. Yeah.
So your growth rate change associated with the amount of amino acid you add, is that for very amino acid limited concentrations?
Yes.
Or if you go into kind of more saturated conditions, you wouldn't have a growth rate change, right?
So yeah, there were some pre-experiments where I applied very increasing concentrations, like over that range that I used here. And at one point, of course, it levels out. So then the amino acid is not limiting anymore. And so when you see that graph, it's just level 1 is the Y-type strain, and then it might go over that, but it levels out, so it stays on the same. So I don't see that slope anymore. And since I was very interested in that slope, I used amino acid concentrations which are limiting.
Just picking up on what you said, so even they may not have evolved at the genetic level to optimize their uptake of any particular amino acid, but if one of them has optimized it by stochastic changes in gene expression or something like that, then they will form a larger fraction of the population, I think, in a rather short amount of time. And to ask you a question, so do you think that auxotrophy occurs before the formation of a microbial community in nature, or after, or perhaps not neither?
I think after. So what we can say, we have, for example, the Y-type also in different carbon sources, and we measured how much amino acid they excrete into the media. So, and these amounts are relatively low, but I think even though they're low, some cells might we evolved that auxotrophy because the Y-type strain is really excreting it, they could benefit by uptaking these amino acids from the Y-type.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it comes after.
Any other questions? If I may throw one last one in. So you mentioned that the different costs at different carbon sources fit well with the predictions from the metabolic system. So do you expect then that those results change with different species that might have differences in their metabolism?
I expect that to some extent. So, for example, it's known that the biosynthetic pathways can differ quite a lot between species. Yeah. So, but for example, tryptophan has always the same precursor. So, so I expect that, for example, for some of these amino acids may stay the same. So they are more cheap if this is a sugar carbon source. But I definitely think that these costs differ between species. So, yeah.
All right. So if there are no other questions, let's thank Silvio again.
Okay.